That was great singing, and I appreciate all those who are playing the instruments today, and wonderful to come together and praise the Lord in this kind of manner. Just a practical note, there is a rumor that someone has a 50th wedding anniversary next weekend. We're talking about King and Lois Abel. So, King, I just realized, though, that we have been waiting for the Maple Leafs to win another Stanley Cup longer than you've been married, which is a very scary proposition. I have a confession to make at the start. I am a lingerer. No, I did not say I'm a linguist, nor did I say I am a linguini, as if I'm comparing myself to Italian pasta. No, let me put it this way. While visiting an art gallery, a sports hall of fame, a museum, maybe a zoo, I like to linger. Slow-paced, quiet observation, absorbing information, very reflective, and coming up with new or renewed discoveries about the object of my attention. Are you a lingerer? I'm not sure if it's a proper word, but it's someone who likes to linger. And here's a test. Yes, in the process I've described observing and absorbing information, but here's the test. If you go to a museum, if you go to a zoo or an art gallery, and you know how they have those signs describing an exhibit, what style of reading do you employ when you're looking at those signs? Do you ignore them? Can't be bothered? Are you somewhat in the middle? You skim read them? Read some, maybe a little more detailed than others, or are you thorough in the way you read those signs? So let's just do a little test here. Don't be embarrassed. There's no right or wrong way to do it. How many of you just ignore those signs? Okay, I'm impressed. Not sure everybody's being completely honest, but I am impressed. How many of you just skim, though? You got to admit, you kind of skim. Okay. How many of you are thorough? You want to make sure you read every word and get full value. Wonderful. So we're the kind of people who drive others with us crazy. They feel we're taking too long, but nevertheless, it's nice to linger. So during July, on a Monday, we were at the Royal Ontario Museum, and we enjoyed a lot of exhibits, the rocks and minerals, the dinosaurs, the exhibits exploring different cultures. And then there were these stuffed animals representing, I guess, animals. And I haven't preached for a while, okay? What else would they represent, right? So anyways, I'm standing at the exhibit, taking it in, this particular exhibit, and there's a boy who came in beside me, and he was doing the same, really kind of taking it in. And then a woman goes, Johnny, don't waste your time here. We're going to the zoo tomorrow. And that triggered him going, yes, I'm going to the zoo tomorrow with my family. I wanted to say to the lady, and thank you for calling me Johnny. That's what I used to get called when I was a boy. But I realized that their family, as our family, were going to the zoo the next day. So at the zoo the next day, it was a fabulous day. It was the Tuesday. It was sunny and hot, but it was still just wonderful to see the different animals and learn about how they're preserving them. And but the one exhibit that really caught my attention was the exhibit for the African penguins. Now, it was interesting because it was a large enclosure, and there was a little girl. She goes, Daddy, are those the penguins? Well, they sure look like Canadian geese to me. I mean, geese are everywhere. They've invaded Springbank Park. They've invaded the Metro Toronto Zoo. Her dad was kind enough to point out, no, he said, way in the corner, there's the African penguins. I was glad because I could then see the African penguins. But Heather said to me, she said, "John, do you hear donkeys?" And I said, I do hear donkeys. And I couldn't figure out, why would donkeys be in the African section of the zoo? Well, you know, it turns out, we found this out a few days later, that the African penguin makes a sound like a donkey. Some of you know that. I'm impressed with your knowledge, and some of you are going to want to go right home this afternoon and check that out. You're going to Google it and see if that's true. Well, my final lingering experience was on Friday, as Josh and Ariana explained. They had a terrific week, and I got here and I got out to see the farm animals, and I like to linger. So I talked to the two women who brought the display. I talked to some of the campers and the counselors. And the trouble with lingering is that the kids decided to help me out. And there was this llama, what is it, an alpaca? Is that the name? The mix. And yeah, a misty, Elaine. I'd never heard that before, but it was called a misty. And anyways, one of the children had a handful of feed and said, "Pastor, why don't you feed this animal?" I got to tell you, I was scared silly. No, seriously. Like that animal could have taken my hand off. And I knew I was playing the piano this morning, and Diane's been so faithful in playing the last few weeks. What if I lost a finger or two? And then my male ego took over, and I said, I'm not going to come across as a scaredy cat to these kids. So I put out my hand, and the llama took the feed from my hand. And I had a terrific sense of accomplishment. Now, you need to know, I have not progressed to the point where I feel like I can handle a cat. That's way down the line, but you can always have hopes that way. But you know, in our fast-paced, overwhelming, confusing world, it's good to slow down, to linger, to take it in, to arrive at new discoveries and new conclusions about the object of our attention. And this all brings us to our study in Luke. And it is true, we have been lingering our way through Luke. Determined at the start of this series that we were going to go at a very slow pace, that we would have some value in going at a slow pace, and we are on track, Lord willing, to be finished this series sometime in 2026. But what intrigues me is that here in chapter 9, it's a lingering opportunity for Jesus and the disciples. The disciples have been very active. They were involved in aggressively advancing the message of the gospel at the start of chapter 9. And then you'll remember our last message in the Luke series, it was the feeding of the 5,000 plus people. There were crowds surrounding them. But now we have an opportunity for some lingering. And for Jesus and the disciples to consider three vital questions. They were vital then and just as important now. Who is Jesus? What kind of Messiah is Jesus? And what does it mean to follow the Messiah, to be a Messiah follower? These are the three questions that we're going to be looking at. And just again, for those of you who are outlining, we're going to look at a proclamation involving who is Jesus. We're going to be looking at a prediction involving what kind of Messiah is Jesus. And then we're going to conclude with what I'm calling a path of discipleship, which gives us an idea of what it really means to follow Jesus. So, Carolyn, if you can turn the screen on there, and we're going to pick up, and I'm going to read this first section for you in 18 to 20. Once when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowd say I am?" Well, they replied, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? Peter answered, God's Messiah. So again, the setting for this question, or a series of questions, the crowds have dispersed. The disciples are there with Jesus. We're told that Jesus was praying in private, but you'll notice the phrase that his disciples were with him. So this was kind of an inner circle opportunity. And it's at that time Jesus asked the question, who do the crowds say I am? Now, this is what Herod was curious about at the start of chapter 9. What's the news on the street? What are they saying about Jesus? So the disciples answered Jesus. Well, some say John the Baptist. Others are saying Elijah. Some are saying that you're a prophet who's come back from old. Minimally, the crowds kind of agreed that he was a holy man, that Jesus was in the line of prophets. But who is Jesus? This past week, I have rekindled my fondness for one of my favorite musicians from years and years ago, Larry Norman. Does anybody know Larry Norman? Okay, some of you who are a bit younger, Larry Norman was kind of the pioneer of Christian contemporary music. Some classic songs like Why Should the Devil Have All the Good Music? He's the rock that doesn't roll. One of my very favorite albums, back in the day of albums, was Only Visiting This Planet. And one of the songs on it was The Outlaw. Some say he was an outlaw. And then in another verse, some say he was a sorcerer. Some say he was a poet. Some say he was a politician. Some say he was the Son of God. And that's what I believe goes the song. But who do people say Jesus is? I was just speculating what it would be like to go over this afternoon to Metro as people are coming in and out of the store to just ask the question. So what do you think of Jesus? Who is Jesus? I think we'd get a lot of answers. I think a lot of people would be very respectful. They'd say, he was a holy man, or his teaching and his ethics still have significance. I think there would be some people, and Josh indicated it with the camper, who would be very unfamiliar with Jesus. It is really, can I use the word tragic? When you think of a younger generation who are oblivious as to who Jesus is. And I would expect that there would be some 20-year-olds and others who would struggle to answer that question. And I'm also aware that some people would go, well, whoever Jesus is, he's irrelevant. Somebody who lived 2,000 years ago has no relevance when it comes to my life. Who is Jesus? And then Jesus flips it around in verse 20. But what about you? Who do you say I am? And that's such a vital question. Maybe some of you wrestled or struggled with that question years ago, but I would submit to you it's a question that needs to be before us no matter where we're at in the Christian journey. Who is Jesus? What about you? I think of Peter's response, God's Messiah. And we quickly learn that this wasn't just Peter's opinion. It's not a matter of us just speculating, well, what do you think? And what do you think? What Peter is doing is affirming who Jesus is. In the Bible, the Greek word for confess means to acknowledge or to affirm a truth. And that's what Peter is doing. Maybe he doesn't have a complete understanding as he speaks and represents the disciples, but he knows enough to know that Jesus is special. He is God's Messiah. What about you? I think there's great value. I don't know about you, but I was inspired today as we read the Nicene Creed. And I think it's a good habit. I think it's a good practice. I would hope that even in your quiet times or your devotional life, read through some of the creeds of the early church. They really establish what we're about and affirm who Jesus is. Someone once said, and I fully concur with it, what you think about Jesus is the most important thing about you. It's kind of staggering, isn't it? And even though some of you can say, well, I made a confession. When I was baptized, I was asked, what do you believe about Jesus? But the question is this an ongoing confession, something that you embrace? Romans 10:9, a great salvation verse. If we confess with the mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe that God has raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. I hope this morning that all of you have had that salvation experience where you have acknowledged and you have confessed Jesus as Lord, that you have believed that God sent Jesus to die for our sins, that God raised Jesus from the dead. These confessionals are so vital and important. Well, let's go to the next slide, the prediction. Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. That's got to be a misprint. He warned them not to tell anyone? And he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. We're going to stop at that point, and I'll pick it up. Carolyn, you can keep the slide on. We'll pick up on the next and final section in a few moments. So you'd think there would be some expectations with Peter and the disciples. They nailed it. They gave the right answer. Maybe we think that Jesus should have reached into his robe and pulled out a gold star and handed it to Peter. Or maybe minimally a high five. Like, way to go, Peter. Like, oh, this is wonderful. The last thing the disciples were expecting was a warning of this nature. You see, in the confession, Jesus, you're God's Messiah, the disciples anticipated that they were on the brink of glory, that this was a confession that would lead to a direct route to glory, to power, prestige, and all that goes with it. They minimally, as most Jews then, expected the Messiah to overthrow the Roman Empire, to overthrow the religious establishment, to set up a kingdom, a literal physical kingdom, and right away. The surprise, as we see, is with God's plan and his agenda as it intersects with the reality of sin and evil. We see the role that the elders and chief priests, the teachers of the law, that the establishment of religion combined with the political world would combine to put Jesus through all that he went through, but still being part of God's plan and God's agenda. Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. It's a difficult title. Only ever Jesus applying it to himself literally means someone who is unique. And we recognize Jesus as the unique God-man who came on a mission. And that mission would involve suffering, being rejected, being killed, but then raised again on the third day. The disciples had such difficulty with this that Jesus is going to repeat this prediction several times. Later in Luke chapter 9, we're going to see it. In Luke 12, in Luke 13, Luke 17, Luke 18. Now, Jesus' ultimate mission, remember this, we saw this in Luke 1, is to establish this everlasting kingdom. Jesus is the king. This is the inauguration of the kingdom that we're reading about in the Gospels, and the ultimate experience of the kingdom is going to come at that later time. But a critical part of Jesus' mission is this rescue and this deliverance mission. More than just a political overthrow, but Jesus dying on the cross to conquer sin, the death, and the devil. And this is what we rejoice in, why Jesus came and did that for us. And it involves suffering. The concept of a suffering Messiah was very new and unusual for the disciples, and it took them a while to take that in, to absorb it. The other day I was watching a church program on TV, not one from here, but it was a church program, and the music was okay. The message kind of stressed ethical living, but there was little or no mention of Jesus. And I remember going like, there is something flagrant that's missing here. No sense or no concept of Jesus' role as Messiah. And I love the balance. I love that song we sang. You sang it so well, The Lion and the Lamb. The lion representing Jesus' power, the one who is the conqueror, the one who is got to be seen in this mighty and wonderful way, and yet he's the lamb. Do you remember in Revelation, John has the vision of Jesus being the lamb who was slain? You remember this old song, not my notes here, Meekness and Majesty. Oh, what a mystery when we think of our Lord Jesus Christ. This is key, what Jesus is teaching here. You remember when we at Easter looked at 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul says, this is of first importance, this is a priority, that Jesus died for our sins according to the Scriptures and was raised on the third day. This is a priority. This is what we're about. If people come into Byron Community Church and been here a while and are kind of figuring out what we're all about, if they never have a sense that this is of first importance to us, that this is priority, then I would argue that we've missed something very much. You remember the old song, we often sing it at Easter, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. You gotta linger to survey, to soak it in, to take it in. And then I think of a weather notice I've seen a lot this summer. Limited visibility, a lot of haze, and one report just had the word smoke. I've never seen that with a weather report, smoky, out. But we need to have a clear vision. We need to see Jesus for who he is. Jesus is the Messiah. But in that Messiahship involves suffering, rejection, being killed for us, and then being raised from the dead. Amazing love that now my King should die for me. Let's stop this morning, and we're going to look at the last section, our final verses. Sorry, Carolyn had a little brain cramp. It's up here. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. Then I think there's another slide here. Yes. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God. What do you do with this paragraph? It's hard-hitting. I remember a number of years ago, it was in the summer, and we had a guest speaker who happened to be one of our missionaries. And our guest speaker had the reputation of preaching some really good messages, and everybody felt really good after our young friend preached. I was away, and this time when he preached, I had about 4 phone calls, people quite concerned. And I said, what was wrong with his sermon? I said, was it heretical? Was he saying things that weren't in the text? And I remember one person said, John, that paragraph is just too extreme to be preaching on in the 21st century. It is hard-hitting. Let's take a look and parse it down a little bit. You know there's 2 sides to the cross. There's Jesus' side, where what Jesus did on the cross, he could only do for us. You're not able to atone for my sins. So that side of the cross is Jesus' responsibility, and thank God Jesus fulfilled that. On the other side of the cross is you and me, and it's a lifestyle. And we see here what it involves. It's like an equation. In fact, it's interesting for me because the first two commands are in the aorist tense, and then you have a present tense verb. So it's like do this and then do that, and you end up with this. So the first part of the equation is to deny self. This is not self-loathing. This isn't a form of self-hatred, but it's this idea of surrendering to the Lord. It's the contrast between holding on versus to give over. To hold on to what I think I'm entitled to versus to give that over to Jesus. Then the second part of the equation, so it's deny self plus take up your cross daily. Cross bearing. We don't talk about that a lot. I remember someone saying to me years ago, I'll take Christ, but not the cross. So we have to look at face value what Jesus is saying, because he then says, you deny self, you take up your cross, you end up following me. Notice it's not I'm going to follow you, but it's you will follow me. My direction, my ways, my path. A question I love to ask the students at the college years ago. I'll ask it this morning. Can you be an authentic Christian? Can you be a disciple of Jesus without being a follower of Jesus? That's when you need to linger over that question. Can you be an authentic Christian, a true disciple of Jesus without following Jesus? Jesus would say, you've misconstrued the message. And what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? This pertains to salvation, but it pertains to our ongoing relationship with Jesus. We're denying self in a world where self-gratification, being number one, looking out for yourself, is what it's all about. You deny yourself and you experience the freedom of surrendering to Christ, where you're liberated to love God and to love others. So you experience that at the same time, taking up the cross, being willing to bear the cross that has been given to you, whether it involves sacrifice, surrender, and service. I'm going to read a little quote as we draw to a close. This is J.I. Packer. Some of you know his book, Knowing God. And last time I saw J.I. Packer, the brilliant New Testament theologian, was in Vancouver. He was literally skipping through a concourse at Regent College in Vancouver. And I know that Packer, quite a fellow, loves jazz music and he loves dance. But this is what he said. The other day, as I sat there savoring hot tubness, now obviously Packer has a hot tub, cracking small jokes and adjusting to the feel of being bubbled over from all angles, it struck me that the hot tub is a perfect symbol of the modern root in religion. The hot tub experience is sensuous, relaxing, floppy, laid back, not in any way demanding, but very, very nice, even to the point of being great fun. Many today want Christianity to be like that and labor to make it so. The ultimate step, of course, would be to clear church auditoriums of seats and install hot tubs in their place. Then there would never be any attendance problems. But if there were no more to our Christianity than hot tub factors, a self-absorbed hedonism of relaxation and happy feelings, while dodging tough questions, unpopular stance, and exhausting relationship, we would fall short of biblical God-centeredness and the cross-bearing life to which Jesus calls us and advertises to the world nothing more than our own decadence. Now, of course, we need balance, don't we? I look at that paragraph and I compare it to a plaque I had up in my room that I lingered over many a night as a boy. When Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So what is it? Is the Christian life hard or is it easy? I think it's both. I think there's a holy tension, and we need that sense of balance. But it's all about the motivation. The rest, the relaxation, the rejuvenation is so that we are prepped up to love God and to love others, to love our families, to love people even more than we might consider ourselves. It's not this kind of, I'm number one, it's all about me. And that becomes the mentality that is so necessary. Verse 25, we get that great advice about profit and loss. The world presents scams to us. I read about a fellow in Waterloo that got hooked into a scam and then to recover from it got into another scam. The idea that putting all your resources and all your energy into self-pursuits is going to end up in failure. It's a scam of the world. Jesus says this is the way, this is the pathway. It can be tough, it can be hard, but the payoff is incredible. And we're challenged with the crosses we bear to be courageous as we engage with the world, to always be compassionate, even when there's going to be people, Jesus is going to say this a little later in Luke, they're not going to like us, they're not going to respect us, they're going to mock us, that we might be ostracized or marginalized, but we continue to be compassionate, knowing, as we saw in this passage, that Jesus is coming again. It could be later this year. It could be before August is finished. And that motivates us, preps us on. There was a church. The pastor preached his message, and then the congregation sang a riveting version of "Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee." At this church, they did the offering after the sermon, and they passed the offering plate, and people were putting their offering envelopes and their coins into the plate. They got up towards the front, and there sat little Johnny with his family. Johnny was about 6 years old. And so as the plate got to him, instead of putting any money into the plate, he didn't have any money with him, little Johnny took the offering plate, placed it on the ground, and he stepped into it. And the people in the church were outraged. Come on, parents, do something about it. But as they started looking over at Johnny, he had tears streaming down his face. He took that song literally. Take my life and let it be. Lord, it's yours. I am not going to tenaciously hold on. I give it up to you. No matter what I do in family life, in work life, or whatever, I have submitted to you. I surrender to you. You are the one in control. Linger about these questions. Who is Jesus? What does it mean when we say that Jesus is the Messiah? What kind of Messiah? And then above all, ask yourself this August holiday weekend, what does it really mean to be a disciple of Jesus? Well, you know what? I think a great song to finish our service would be that wonderful song, Jesus Messiah. So Rick and others are going to come and stand and sing it out as best you've ever sung it as we close the service.